Hello everyone. So in this session, what we're going to do is basically learn about something known as exception handling, or the way we think about handling errors. You are already used to syntax errors, right? So when you type something wrong in Python, so it throws a message and it shouts at us saying that there is something wrong with the code that you've written. So sometimes what happens is we want to know what kind of errors have come up, and what should be done with the right kind of error. Like, for example, you are sending an email, and you are not able to send the email anymore, and you got an error, and based on the type of error, like network error or any other error, you want to basically retry sending an email to the user, right? So you are performing some operation, and you want to retry, you want to identify what kind of error it is, and you want to perform some kind of cleanup after a specific operation that you have done, a specific task that you have done. So all that capability every language gives you, okay, a way of making some operation, and trying to see what kind of errors that are occurring, and trying to make sure that you based on the error type, you perform the business logic, right? So that makes the software much more mature. And you see any open source software or any enterprise software, so handling errors is the most common type of making your product mature. Okay. um, we never know, because we do not have control about the systems where your software would be used, uh, be in cloud, be in system. For example, the code that you write, keeping in mind only as part of Linux, might not work on Windows. Okay, so you need to be ready where the customers are going to use your code. So to make it more mature and to give a right messages to the customers, you should know how to handle the errors. Okay. So to give an example, in this particular file, I hope I'm sharing something to you guys. Uh, so in this file, I'm just calling a function called div. Okay. So what does this div do? It has two numbers, 10 and a 0, and we do 10 divided by 0. And basically, this function, let us see whether this will work. Okay. So what I've done is, I'm in the same folder where this file is there, and I'm going to run this python intro.py. Okay. So I hope this screen, the characters are visible, or should I make it a little more bigger? Okay. So, okay. So basically, when I ran this code, uh, it shouted at me saying that there is some error. Okay, this is how the error looks like, and it is saying that, okay, this is, you are doing a division by 0, and by default you should not divide the number by 0, and Python does not support this kind of error. Okay. So this function is throwing an error. Okay, this is calling as, this is throwing an error. Now what to do when such kind of error occurs? So similar cases, like yesterday we learned how to open a file, right? So suppose you're trying to open a file in a read mode and the file does not exist. So what happens then? It throws an error saying that the file does not exist, right? So we need to handle what should happen when the file is not there. So the way to handle is, basically, you put all the code that you want to run, okay, in a block called try. Okay. So you tell to Python, okay, try this code. If any error occurs, you put in an except block. Very simple. Okay. And you just print, okay, error occurred, or what. For now, I'm just printing this, but you can do any business logic. Let's see the output now. See, now you got a better error saying that, okay, error occurred. But you want to know what kind of exactly the error. This is a generic error that I printed, error occurred, but we do want to know what kind of error it is. So what I will do is, I will take exception, and I will call it EX. Okay. This exception is a Python global exception. That means any error will come to this. Okay. And whatever is coming in this, I'm just renaming it for our purposes into a variable called EX. And let me print what exactly is the error here. I'm converting this X into a string so that I can print. Okay. So now let me print this. See, now we are giving a better message to the customers saying that the error occurred, but the error is exactly division by 0. Okay. So this is the very basic way of actually handling an error. You try a block of code. Okay. A block of code. Block of code that you want to try. And in this block, you write error handling mechanism. Okay, what happens when an error occurs? So this is how you write. Okay, so there can be n number of exceptions. Okay, now we exactly know that this is going to throw an error called zero division error, right? So we should be capable to handle a specific error as well, not any error, right? We want to, if suppose there are 5 6 types of error that are expected from your code. If a specific error occurs, you want to perform a specific operation, right? So I can do a chaining of these exceptions. Okay, what I can say is now I can add another condition similar to try if else. So I know it is a zero division error. Okay, and I'm going to say it's a zero division error. Just a minute. Okay, it's a zero division error. I'm going to print it just for the sake of it. Now here this is a generic exception. Anything apart from zero division error, this is going to come to the next block. Okay, so this should be the last block in the exceptions. You can add any number of exceptions on the top. You want to add file not found error, but it should be related to your code that you're trying. Okay, so now you have a try and you have one except block, you have another except block. It is like elif else block. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it checks for zero division error. Oh, this is not zero division error, then it goes to the next exception. So let us see what kind of error it is now. So it just prints to me that it's a zero division error. Okay, because this got handled, that error got handled by this specific except block. Now what I will do is I will divide it by 1. So now what should be the output here? The output of this particular file should be nothing because we are not printing the result of actual division anywhere. So it ran this command, there was no error, so these two blocks are skipped. Okay, these two blocks are skipped. So whatever you written, so let us say I will print here, whatever you written here will get printed. So let me rerun this code again. So this becomes 10.0 because you are dividing 10 by 1 and division always gives you a float value. Okay, so you have try except block. Okay, so any questions here? All right, so there are uh, you know by default in Python there are lot many exceptions. Let me show you few of them. So these are actually the inbuilt exceptions that uh, we know of. Okay, for example, we already seen an error called import error when we learned about files and modules, right? So module not found error, this was raised when a specific module was not found in the system, and in all the three locations it was not able to find, so it threw this error. Okay, we also understood about file not found error, right? This is a kind of OS error, and if the file that you're trying to read does not exist, it throws this particular error. And few of the additional errors like permission error. What does this mean? That your code is trying to read a file which does not have a permission called read, like there is no for to it. Okay. Now there is a runtime error, syntax error that you're already aware of, the indentation error. If you didn't give indentation rightly, you would get this error. Then there is a value error. Okay. So we yesterday saw some Unicode error, right? So similar to that, there is a value error. I will show you some examples. And there are some errors like warnings as well. So these are all inbuilt errors. Uh, the interesting fact is that you can create your own errors as well. Okay. Now you understood how to actually catch the errors. Now sometimes what happens is in your code, you want to raise your own specific error. Okay, you know according to your business logic what kind of error it should be. So Python will not generate the business logic for you, right? So Python is just a tool for you. Now sometimes what you want to do is you want to generate a your own error. So the mechanism to you know uh, you know raise that error is using a keyword called raise. And for example, I want to raise this zero division error myself. Here the code itself raised that error, but here I am myself raising that error. So now let me show you the output here. So it gives you 10, but it also gives you an error called zero division error. Okay. The reason is sometimes in the code there is a business logic where, okay, according to me, the calculation of simple interest should be like this, but the inputs are wrong. So I want to raise my own error. In that case, this is how you basically raise the error. So now we understood about a couple of errors. We saw what all Python errors are there by default, and we understood about try, except, block. Okay. Now we know that if there is an error, it goes into a specific exception, and this is handled by the exception block. Sometimes what I want to do is, if there are no exceptions, I want to perform something. Okay. If there are some exceptions, I want to perform something. At that time, you will use a statement called else here. So try else. I will write something here. This code gets executed only when there are no errors. So print in else block means no errors. Okay. So far so good. What does it say? Unreachable code. That's fine. Okay. Now let us try to run this. So what happens here? So nothing actually happens because it goes into zero division error. It never comes to else. The reason is this block of code only gets executed when there is no error. So let's come back to one here and let's put it. Let's save it and let's try to run this code. Now it says 10.0. It is printing it here. So it has not gone back to the else block. So it should ideally go to the else block like you see here just a minute. So the else block, it should go. Let me try except else. So there is no error here, and I'm printing. What happened to this? Just a minute, let me try something. So what happened here is basically as you understood in the function definition, the written statement, if you do it, The return statement, if we do it, the problem here is that the code will automatically go from line number 3 to line number 16. Okay, it will directly go there. So what I will do is, just for the sake of this, I will do result is equal to this. Okay. Now your output should be that it goes to in else block, means no errors. Okay. So the previous thing was that we were returning immediately, but now we are storing the result in a variable where and now we also have a else block which only gets executed when there were no errors in the try block. Okay. Similarly, we also have a block called finally block. Okay. So irrespective of whether error occurred or not, okay, irrespective of whether error occurred or not, this block will be run. So let's see the output here. So you ran the try block. These two were skipped because there were no errors. It went to else because there was no error in the try. It printed in else block, no errors. And it also went to finally block and printed in finally block. Okay. So finally is used generally to clean up the resources that you used in the try block, and you want to, irrespective of what happened in the try, you want to perform something finally. Okay, so that is called a finally block. So basically you have the error handling in Python in terms of try, except, else, finally blocks. Okay, I will show one more example with the file handling now, but before that, do you have any questions? All right, so let's try to open a file which does not exist and see what happens. Okay, let's do that. Hmm, I will create a function called read file, and I will open the file. Okay, now let me basically call this function. Now let's see that. See, now we got a file error called no such file. Okay, no such file, a file not found error. So now we will try to handle it. Can you guys try it out? I will, pause the recording. So let's try it with the try block of code here, and let's try to capture an error called file not found error. Okay. So what is this meaning? Unsolved reference. Right. So 1 second. Where's dot? 1 second. So for now, I would quickly try to get it like exception here as ex and print str of ex. So let me just print that. So it says no such file or directory, but in my exception itself, I know that the error that we're getting is that I'm not able to read the file. So what I will do is I will open the file in write mode. What does this do? This basically creates the file. So I will just say print creating the file now. Okay. Now we know that the else block uh, will never get executed, right? The reason is that there was a failure and we caught it as an exception. Now in final a block, I will do some operations, right? Like fp dot write something, write some content into file, and I will also close it. So now when I do this, basically it will say that there was an error and you created the file. And if you just notice, there should be a file that was created called read.txt, and we have created a new file automatically. Okay, so this is how the business logic uh, that happens. Now we need to figure out where does this file not found error uh, exist, right? So it is part of the OS error, and we should be able to handle it. So I hope that is clear. So this is part of the OS error, and we should be able to actually use that. I think that's about it for today's session. And if you in the next classes, we will